Okay. Oh my God, it's not weird. Okay, this is The Cold War by Nicholas Romanek, me. I'm doing this in Zoom. Jesus Christ, this is hard to do. Weird. Yeah, let's get into it. How do I change my... This is going to be rough. Just saying. I gotta change my background. Okay, here we go. This is good. Okay, let me download the second one. Here we go. Oh, it's cut off. Anyways, I'm gonna get my notes. Yeah. Cold War is fought without violence. So it's the opposite of a hot war, which would be fought with soldiers and tanks and bombs and lots of explosions and whatnot. So mostly it's kind of just for political influence and trying to spread your ideologies. And then a proxy war is instigated by a larger superpower who don't actually participate. So it would be kind of like me telling one of my friends to go fight someone else, but I actually just kind of stand by and watch, and then I'm there for support if needed. But yeah, yeah, this is good now. March 12th, 1947, Harry Truman decided down here that the U.S. would provide support to countries affected by the World War II. This was mostly in an attempt to stop the spread of communism. So he'd say, I'll give you all this money and whatnot if you agree to have a more free right-wing market versus a left-wing market. And they'd check stuff like their finances and all that. And then, yeah, that's how they got their aid. And that was one of the ways the U.S. government attempted to stop the spread of communism kind of early on. So the next one is the Berlin Blockade. So on June 24th, 1948, Berlin was kind of, right after World War II, Berlin was split in kind of half. So the West belonged to, split into 4 zones actually. The France had a piece, Britain had a piece, and then the US had a piece, and the Soviets had a piece on the east side. So the UK, France, and US kind of joined together and were like, we're going to keep this kind of liberal, and they wanted to rebuild the states. Or Germany, sorry. They wanted a strong economical Germany so they could support the regrowth of Western Europe, whereas Russia had been destroyed by Germany twice in a row in both world wars, and they kind of wanted something, they wanted a weaker Germany, and they wanted also a buffer zone. So that's kind of like a distance between the liberal West and Russia. So it's kind of like a wall of sorts, where it's kind of, the US doesn't have easy access to get to Russia. They'd have to go through all of these Russian satellite states before they could get to it. Oh, and then the Berlin Blockade, sorry, I got sidetracked. The Berlin Blockade was a power struggle and blocked all road, rail, and canal transportation to West Germany. So they'd have no power and they'd have no food and whatnot from West Berlin, sorry. But the Soviets didn't account that the Americans had planes. And so the American, British, and French solution to this was the supply of 5,000 to 8,000 tons of supplies every day, with planes landing in Berlin every 30 seconds, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, that's how they solved it. So the formation of NATO. I gotta get the meme in here. So NATO was formed by mostly liberal countries for the collective security, and I think it was kind of just like a pact to stop communism. So it was a way they could all gather and talk about strategies they were using to stop communism, and then just collective security. So I think NATO nowadays is kind of played out. They don't do very much, but yeah, I don't have very much on NATO. Fun fact, Jake Healy's dad, I think, works at a NATO base in Italy. The Korean War. Is this cut off? This is cut off so badly. Oh, the communists. Oh, I just had the thing small. That's kind of bad. The Korean War. North Korea attempted to invade South Korea because North Korea is communist and then South Korea is democratic. This is kind of close to the Vietnam War, where the North is communist and then the South is democratic, and they tried to invade, except the only difference is the Korean War ended in a stalemate where no one won, and then the Vietnam won. The Communist Party won. Yeah, so it was June 25th, 1950 to July 27th, 1953. I've got all the dates in here. I'll send you the presentation if you want. I haven't mentioned any of the dates from the old one. I should have downloaded all these photos before I started this presentation. So the Hungarian Revolution, U.S. supported anti-communist protest. The U.S. tries to stop communism in Hungary, but USSR support shuts it down. So pretty much the Hungarians weren't happy with the current state of the government. And so they started revolting, which was a pretty big thing with Eastern Europe, was the revolts against Russia and them kind of just trying to shut it down. I think that's why Russia lost, is they had to not only convince other people to join them, but shut down every other country that was invading or deciding that they didn't like communism because they had no bread. And there was probably no cake. Tribute to the Renaissance. But yeah, the USS shut it down, and then eventually installed a communist government in Hungary. I think Hungary lost like all of the wars. They're not very good at fighting. On April 17th, 1961, a bunch of Cuban exiles who were kind of against Castro in the beginning and were exiled for treason, I guess. But in April 17th, 1961, they tried to reinvade. And after kind of finding solitude in the States, and they were given U.S. support and military stuff or whatever, but it only lasted about 2 days. And yeah, it was kind of just like a weak invasion, poorly planned. And it kind of showed how weak the U.S. kind of was. So gave Castro a little power. And I think, oh shit. And I think that's where he kind of started. The USSR was like, hey, we can use Cuba to our advantage and hold some missiles there. And then the missile crisis happened. We won't be talking about the missile crisis here. I don't have enough time. Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. Basically a mass protest, another one kind of like Hungary. It was January 5th, August 21st, 1968, and it was shut down by USSR tanks and military, in which they eventually kept the communist government set up in Czechoslovakia. I don't know if Czechoslovakia is actually communist today. I'll have to look into that. That'd be kind of a good thing to touch on my next time I do a presentation on the Cold War. Hopefully after I die. Oh yeah, here we go. Tiananmen Square. I gotta kneel down for this one. Okay. So Tiananmen Square started as a student protest against the Chinese Communist Party. Um, this is probably one of the most famous photos from the Cold War. It's like one of the man who was never identified, fun fact, 30 years later, blocking tanks in the middle of the road. And I think he stood there for about 15 minutes, and then he kind of just started walking on, and nobody ever knew who he was. So it started as a student protest, kind of just against the Communist Party of China, and they wanted better rights and less censorship and whatnot. But it ended up turning into like a giant massacre. And to this day, the Chinese government still tries to cover it up despite all the evidence and whatnot. And I think not too long ago, there was like a 30-year anniversary. Oh yeah, last year. 89, 99 is 10. 99, 2009 is 20. Yeah, 2019, there was like a 30-year anniversary, and the Chinese government stayed silent. They didn't mention anything as people celebrated it. So yeah, that pretty much concludes my presentation. I just got one last thing. So yeah, I got my sources here. Like I said, I'll send you my presentation so you can check the sources and whatnot. And a lot of it actually came out of the textbook, or I used to study stuff like this as a kid. So it's kind of cool that we're actually doing it now. And yeah, thank you for watching, and come to my TED Talk.